Okay. Can everyone see that? Cool. Okay. All right. So this is brain spotting specifically with consideration for neurodivergent clients. I'm eligible, she, they. I'm a clinician at Holistic Child and Family Practice in Seattle. Parts of my identity are that I'm white, neurodivergent, queer, femme, of average body size. It's important for me to share with you parts of my identity because they impact my perspective and how I see the world. There are parts of my identity that move smoothly through the systems in place and parts that don't move as smoothly through the systems in place. And all of this shapes my perspective. So there's some strengths to that, and there are also limitations. I've worked as a mental health therapist in a variety of inpatient and outpatient settings since 2013, and I've completed the brain spotting phase 1 and 2 training. Today, I'm really hoping that we can gain a introductory level of awareness about the brain spotting modality, what it is, that you would have enough information to know, is this something that you want to pursue further, either in your own therapy or as a clinician. I really like how brain spotting talks about attunement, and I hope that we can consider how those attunement skills could help us become more neurodivergent affirming in whatever modality we're using. And I hope that we can all take away at least 3 more concrete ideas for how to make our own modalities more neurodivergent affirming. All right, so the history of brain spotting. This is David Grand, who's a PhD. He discovered brain spotting during an EMDR session with a client in 2003. So David Grand was trained as a social worker in the 70s, has worked a lot with trauma. He's worked a lot with high-profile athletes. He was trained later in psychodynamic therapy and really is drawn towards the relational attunement in the therapeutic relationship. And then in 1993, he was trained in EMDR. So he found that EMDR was really effective with a lot of clients, but it's very structured and you follow certain procedures. And he found that with some clients, this was disrupting the relational attunement. And so he created his own gentler EMDR protocol that he called Natural Flow EMDR. And so during an EMDR session with a client that I think he'd been seeing for about a year in 2003, he was using a pointer for the bilateral stimulation or for the eye movement. And the client's eye movement stopped. And instead of following protocol and encouraging the client to continue the eye movement, he just followed the client and stayed on that spot for the rest of the session. And it was profoundly healing for the client. So from there, he just began to explore these spots with more clients, and it developed into brain spotting. So the way that he began to explore this was when he was using the pointer with clients, and a pointer just looks kind of like this. He would just observe for any reflexes that the client had and then stay on that spot where he observed the reflexes. So that can look like little eye wobbles, the eye kind of pausing or freezing or glitching over a spot. Sometimes it can look like swallowing, yawning, little facial twitches. So as he began to develop practice observing these reflexes and processing, he started to call these spots where he would hold the pointer the brain spot. Clients consistently reported that this type of processing felt really powerful. Some clients reported that it felt like they were processing from the back of their head. If you've ever experienced that, it's hard to describe. It's a strange sensation. Dr. Grand began to share his discovery with other therapists. They were having really good results, and this just continued to develop. Research is still young, but the research that's coming out is really promising about the effectiveness of brain spotting. So some of what we know about brain spotting is that there's research showing that brain spotting can be at least as effective as EMDR for PTSD that's not complicated with substance use. Currently, there are over 13,000 therapists in 40 countries practicing brain spotting. It translates really well between cultures, which we'll talk a little bit more later. And brain spotting was actually found to be the most effective mode of therapy for survivors of the Sandy Hook shooting. And in the slides that I'll send out, you can read that report if you want to and read about the different modalities that were used for these survivors. So the basis of, or the foundation of brain spotting is dual attunement. And that refers to the attunement to the client and more of the conscious conversation that's happening, but also attunement to what's happening in the client's brain. And so this looks like looking for those micro reflexes that a client might have and being attuned to those. And it's also a felt sense of attunement. Part of the way, or one of the analogies that's used to teach this attunement is following the comet. This has been really helpful for me, not just in starting to figure out how to be in brain spotting, how to be attuned in brain spotting, but it's really helped my other modalities that I use. So in brain spotting, we talk about how the client is the comet and the therapist is the tail. And you always want to stay in the tail of the comet. So if you notice yourself jumping ahead of the comet, and so interjecting your own thoughts or your own interpretations, you're no longer fully attuned. If you find yourself on the side, really going off topic of where the client is going, you're also out of tune. So whenever you notice that happening, you just come back into the tail of the comet and follow and trust that the client's body knows how to heal, knows where to go, and that you can trust the process with your client. I've found that this has been really healing with a lot of neurodivergent clients who went through childhood undiagnosed, because with that, there came just repeated traumas where they were not trusted. They were told that their experience of their body, of their sensory system just couldn't be true. That's not how we experience things. That's not how we feel things. It can't be that bad. And part of that trauma is developing a sense that you can't trust your body. And I found this process of being attuned and following in the tail of the comet and deeply trusting that the client knows where to go and that their body knows how to heal can be really healing to that wound of not being able to trust yourself. So there's some foundational skills in brain spotting. One that I really like is gaze spotting. So you'll notice when you talk to clients, when somebody's getting emotional, often they kind of look to the side or look away from you and have a moment where they're thinking, and then they come back to you and start to narrate the story more cognitively. And so gaze spotting is when you notice that happen. Somebody looks aside and the emotion is felt more strongly, and you just ask them to look back at that spot and continue processing. So it could be like, I saw you look over at that flower. Can you continue to look at that spot while you process? And it can help clients be more in their body and start to have that emotional processing with you. Another form of brain spotting would be to use the outside window. And so that's when you use the pointer to help the client find the brain spot. And you are going to move the pointer very slowly across their field of vision and look for those micro reflexes and use your own observations and insight or intuition to pick a spot and go ahead and start processing. So a lot of times this is how you would do a first or second brain spotting session with a client. And really quickly, clients will start to use the inside window on their own. So they'll start to tell you, oh no, I need the pointer over there, and just have this felt sense of this is where I need to process today. So inside window is where you do the same thing. You move the pointer across very slowly, and a client will tell you this is where I need to process at this time. And these are just guidelines. They're not rules, which I really like. So if a client wants to do something different, if it's not harmful, do it. A story that I liked that came up in my training was David Grand was brain spotting with a client, and the client just said, I want to hold your pointer. And there aren't rules, it doesn't matter. So David gave the pointer to the client and he processed and it satisfied him, and that was all he needed. So if a client wants to try something, wants to do something, and it's not harmful, follow the client. And this can be really supportive when clients have different cultural beliefs or different religious beliefs. It's really common for clients to bring their cultural beliefs or religious beliefs up when they're brain spotting. And with the image of following the comment, we can just put our assumptions aside or our beliefs aside and trust that the client is going where they need to go and be with them in that process, even if we don't fully understand it. So what's actually happening in the brain when we brain spot? We really need more research. It's limited, but we do have some educated guesses. There's a training that I haven't gotten to take yet, but I really want to take. There's a neurobiologist who does a training on brainspotting.com to talk about what he thinks is happening. But I don't understand all of that yet. I have not taken that class. But in brain spotting, we talk about the cortical brain, which is more of the conscious thinking brain, and we talk about the subcortical brain, which is part of the subconscious brain. So when our brain is in deep processing, it moves much more quickly than our conscious processing does. And in brain spotting, we want to drop into that. If we are too caught up in trying to analyze everything or talking too much, we are slowing ourselves down and we're moving more into our cortical brain, and we are not able to drop into that subcortical process. A lot of times with neurodivergent clients, they really want to know and understand what's happening. And there might be some trauma that makes it difficult to be inside their body, or some interoception difficulties that make it a little harder to drop in. And we want to support them with giving them understanding so that they can trust the process, and we want to slow our talking down and go ahead and drop in with them. So oftentimes the cortical brain is going to struggle to let go and trust the subcortical processing. When this happens, we want to talk about it and talk about how the tools like brain spotting can help us engage deeper. Personally, I like to talk about the book Burnout by Emily Nagoski and Amelia Nagoski. So in this book, if you've read it, they talk about we can't think our way out of emotions or stress or trauma. We have to find ways to support our body's natural processes. And brain spotting can be a really helpful tool for this. So what are some ways that I've seen that brain spotting can support neurodivergent humans? Neurodivergent humans or people with complex trauma often struggle with interoception. And just the process of brain spotting and asking what is happening in the body and then sitting intentionally with the body for extended periods of time does seem to build interoception over time. So I've noticed with clients and with myself during the first brain spotting sessions, identifying where things are felt in the body can be more difficult. And then over time, it just becomes easier and more intuitive. It seems like this modality is supportive of demand avoidance. So modalities that are more protocols often seem to trigger some of the demand avoidance when we tell somebody that they need to process in this way or they need to follow the protocol. And with brain spotting, there's some guidance, there are some tools, but there really aren't rules. And I find that this can be supportive, helping clients feel like they are in control and they get to choose how they engage with this. Brain spotting helps build inner resources for increased distress tolerance. So in brain spotting, sometimes when we're finding the brain spot, we're looking for increased activation. So we're processing a feeling of distress in the body. But there are other times that we look for resource spots. So if somebody is very overwhelmed, we would look for the spot in their body where they feel the most grounded or least activated, and then find a brain spot to help them connect to that and build resourcing around that. I've had several clients say that this is something that they've noticed themselves now doing in their daily life, where when they feel really overwhelmed, so anxious in a situation, they now are going to the part of their body where they feel that the least and focusing on that versus, focusing on their upset stomach. And then we talked about this a little bit earlier. With neurodivergent clients, so many have been taught that their body is not trustworthy, that they can't trust their body. And this process just reinforces over and over and over that you can trust your body. It's really cool to see clients start to process something in a very somatic way and develop awe for their body and awe for what their body is able to do. So some considerations for how to make a modality neurodivergent friendly. I got all of this from Stephanie, who works at Holistic. Stephanie has done quite a bit of work around how can we make different therapy modalities more neurodivergent friendly. All of these points are points that she has taken out of research. She is also offering consultation over the summer for anybody who wants to work around how to make their own modality more neurodivergent friendly. So if you're interested in that, just email us at Holistic. So some things that we can do are discuss with the client how their brain works. We don't want to just assume that, for example, a client is able to visualize things or thinks in words or is able to experience their body in particular ways. We really want to know so we know how we're sitting with our client and how to best support them. We don't want to make assumptions about how their brain works. It is not uncommon for holistic therapists or people in mixed neurotype therapeutic relationships to feel that they aren't receiving the expected cues from their client and think that the relationship isn't developing well. We really don't want to let our insecurities come up and just jump to assumptions. Just discuss with your clients, how is the relationship feeling? We just have to ask very directly and have this conversation directly. Oftentimes with mixed neurotype therapeutic relationships, we just have to spend some extra time building that relationship. Also, research shows that most autistic people encode memories more intensely than neurotypical or allistic people. So it could be important just to spend more time processing from resource spots versus activated spots. And I have found this to be true in my personal practice. And then you want to be really, really clear about what to expect. You don't want to throw in surprises or try to do something without telling the client what's happening first. All right. Are there any questions, any thoughts? Do y'all have experiences that you want to share? Yes, I will email the PowerPoint. I'm not strong at emailing, which I think y'all know, and I will try to email it out more quickly.
Bobby Joe.
I just wanted to say I was super excited to hear you talk about this because I just did a phase 1 brain spotting training last month.
Ooh.
And so I'm just in the process and I use IFS a lot. And I'm at a place with many of my clients that we've been using IFS because I've been in private practice for like 9-ish months. And so we're kind of like at a perfect place where we're like getting to do unburdening type of work. And so I'm kind of figuring out how I pair those two together. But I just really appreciate some of the things that you've noticed or that you're sharing. I know I was grateful in my training. There were, besides myself, a couple other folks who were like doing a good job of asking the presenters about some kind of neurodivergent specific stuff of adaptations and things like that. And I felt mixed in their responses because sometimes I think like I appreciated that on one hand they would kind of say like trust the model and don't make assumptions about how, because I think they thought sometimes people were saying, oh, if this client's autistic, they won't be able to do this. And so they were challenging those kind of beliefs, which I think is good to challenge that. But also sometimes it some of those responses felt a little dismissive of like, oh, it'll just work and you don't need, trust the model and you don't have to make any adaptations. And so I left feeling kind of mixed about that piece. And I feel like I've started to figure out some pieces or just adaptations I've figured out from other models that seem to be helping. But I guess, are there any other things that you've noticed specifically with most of my clients either are ADHDers or autistic that seem to be kind of helpful possible adaptations to keep in mind outside of the stuff
Hmm,
you've covered so far?
that's a great question. I'm not trained in IFS, but something that I've consistently noticed with my clients is that a defensive part will come up when we first start this process. And I love that. Um, I think this process really gives a great, with thinking about following the comment, just a great support around we want to go where that defensive part is going and be curious and supportive. We don't want to push past that. And I found that to be really helpful. As we know, those defensive parts or protective parts often hold really big parts of our story and are
Mhm.
really important. Um, Something that I really respect about how David Grand does this is he does not believe that he holds a monopoly on a type of healing. He's discovered something that's really helpful and he wants people to be able to learn it. So there are people who will go um, after mass trauma events and teach this to community leaders and religious leaders so that they have more tools. Um, Also, the people who teach the trainings are contractors, so he's not controlling how they teach it. And I think that's a strength. And also, I've learned from talking to different people that different trainers do teach this really differently. Um, and the trainers that I had, they just really considered how different people's identities do impact how we sit with one another. And I don't know that that's the case with every trainer. I think if you can, when you get to the point where you're getting a consultant, finding somebody who's going to be just have more experience around neurodivergent people would be helpful.
Um, I've noticed similarly to Ellie that really consistently my clients, when I'm doing this, the protector part will make itself known fairly early. So I have this sort of like preliminary buy-in, and then this protector part comes out and says, and usually they present it of like I want this to work and I believe in this, and I have this part of my brain that's telling me that this is stupid and I'm making myself too vulnerable and this is too weird. And I'm like, what a beautiful opportunity to be in this like really engaged, thoughtful space and to just like check in with that part. Like, what do you need? Um, and it has changed. I think that the relationship with the protector part has changed so much faster when they're already
Hmm.
engaged with their body in brain spotting. So recently I had somebody who just had been having this sort of like what they thought was intrusive thoughts or an internal monologue for years. We had maybe 10 minutes of a session. We talked to the part, and then I checked in the next week and they were like, oh yeah, that's it. Like, it's just done. Like, I don't want to cry all the time anymore. That part is actually like really affirming now, which has not happened when I've just done parts work without being really engaged in sort of that like space in your body.
Yeah, that's
Mhm.
interesting. I had that actually just earlier today that kind of happened. And I did ask a question in a group as I am trying to figure out how to mix those together. Of somebody had a part that we're very familiar with and have worked with a lot start to show up while we were doing that. And intuitively, I just trusted myself. So I kind of shifted a little bit into the IFS at that point and explored that part. And again, because we've done a lot of work, I was able to just be like, you know, we're trying to do this work so this protective part doesn't have to work so hard. And we'd already established that one was tired and worn out. And so it just stepped back. And then we continued with the brain spotting. And so it was that simple. Um, but I also got the sense that like in that training and the kind of brain spotting approach would be more to, if you were just doing that, would be to just kind of acknowledge it, but then kind of keep going um, for the most part, or to see if the client's willing to keep going, which is different.
I will say that I just follow them wherever they want to go. So oftentimes we start, it goes to parts work. And then they're like, oh, okay, I want to come back. And then they re-engage in that. And then most of the time, just based on the humans that I work with very busy brains, they will say, like, I want to stop it. And now I just want to talk, like, a verbally process, because now I have this new awareness that I didn't have before. And they keep asking me, like, is that okay? And I'm like, literally anything is okay. When I did this, I like lied down on the floor. I just was unburdening all this like trauma that I had in my body. And I just started like standing up and taking up like a ton of space. I think that one of the ways, just for any modality, is to just really trust the person that we're working with to know their own system and their own experience.
Yeah, thank you for all of that.
Yeah. And I think with that, like I've had conversations with clients around stimming. So Bobby Joe in my 2 trainings, I kind of felt this like we were supposed to sit very still for very long brain spotting sessions. That's what other people seem to be doing. And a lot of my clients don't like to sit still, and the following the comet analogy has been really helpful. Of, like Marie saying, people can just get up and move and stem and do whatever they need to do. It's okay. We trust their body. There was, another piece. The music seems to be really helpful. So I've noticed with ADHD people having the bilateral music, which switches at random between ears, and you do have to make sure that you have the headphones set up so that you can hear that, seems to really help people who struggle a little bit more with attention to drop into their bodies. And then I've noticed for other clients who may not have that same struggle, it can be distracting or annoying. So just noticing what sensory supports are helpful.
I know personally when I was doing it, and kind of what I found so far with the like the specific CD or whatever, or the tracks, the switching of tracks though, it was super distracting. So what I've kind of found, and what I've just kind of I think adapted, is I just ask the client, or I just set one song on a loop so that it's consistent throughout, because like some of them, and to me, I don't know how that doesn't bother other people. Like that's like mind-boggling to me that you can't be bothered by going from like watery music to something slightly jazzy in the next track. But that's, I guess, one adaptation that I've found is really helpful, is as long as it like is the same sound throughout, then it seems helpful. But if it's switching, that seems to, my practice partner, I believe, had ADHD, but undiagnosed based on their experiences as we worked together. But they had the same kind of experience too. So that was interesting.
I will put something, I'll put a link in the chat and then in the resources. I really like the Bodhi Tree bilateral. They have it sort of based upon theme of albums. And so one of the albums is just sort of like forest sounds with music accompanied. And it's just one track that's 45 minutes. And so I can just ask, like, would you prefer like beach sounds or forest sounds? And then sort of like just get people into a spot in an environment where most of my clients really feel more connected to the natural world and animals anyway. And so when we've done like visualizations, it's been something that has, it's always like, I'm outside without any humans around. And so it's a really nice sort of track to center yourself in. Rebecca?
Hi, thank you so much. This is really enlightening and interesting. I just want to present the fact that I am actually a licensed acupuncturist and herbalist. And so I am not a therapist. So if this question feels a little bit outside, then please feel free to just say, we're not going to talk about that. In addition to having a telehealth specialty practice for queer families and kids surrounding like herbal medicine, I have a local practice here in Vermont and Abenaki territories, and have started to go to like a residential support program for neurodivergent young adults to do the NODA protocol, which is like a something that was popularized by the Black Panthers to work with addiction in the Black community in the 70s, and has sort of grown to be a response to trauma and other features of systematic racism, homophobia, trauma of various kinds. And so I was wondering if this music piece might be an appropriate addition to the chair acupuncture that I am offering to these students, these young adults who are neurodivergent with a variety of experiences, everything from sensory differences to ADHD to ASD, with lots of different capacities in different realms, as a way to help integrate the physical somatic sensations that occur when they are receiving ear acupuncture. Because I have noticed that for some students, it can feel challenging to be with, even though they have described it to me as feeling really pleasurable. Or one student yesterday was like, that was amazing, and then like ran out of the room. It's like just kind of like yeah. So I'm wondering if that's appropriate, if that would be a good use of this, or if there are any other thoughts around that. Thank you so much for having me in this space. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're here. I'm really curious about your practice and want to hear more. In my training, they talked about acupuncturists and physical therapists and occupational therapists using brain spotting with their practice, and talked about how what's cool about brain spotting, it's not like you have to take on this new modality. You can use it with whatever else you're practicing.
Oh,
Yeah, so you can definitely try the music. I listen to the music when I write notes. It helps my brain focus. There are some songs that are really annoying, and so I change from those, but the actual song doesn't matter. What's helpful is that it's switching at random between your ears, so you do need the headphones.
okay.
There's a limited style of music that's available right now, but what was shared in my training is that they are trying to make more they're trying to make more music that's going to be helpful for different cultures with this bilateral engineering. So that's in the works.
That's very cool. Where might I access this music to offer to the students and to my patients in private practice?
Marie put some in the chat. You also can just look up David Graham bilateral music. Marie, maybe you can put it in the chat for me. It's on Spotify, Apple, YouTube. You can buy it on CD.
Thank you so much. It's so cool.
And then I have a
Yes.
question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Just gonna quickly say that the bilateral stimulation is supposed to help put people into their parasympathetic nervous system, like activate the parasympathetic nervous system to help us just sort of more easily get into our bodies. And I wanted to ask a question from Asia, which is, do you have any advice for people that are specifically just working with telehealth?
So I only do telehealth. I did my trainings through telehealth. I've done all of my practice through telehealth with brain spotting. It hasn't been a barrier for me. I think the biggest barrier was the pointer that I had such a tiny little top. It would just disappear into my screen. So I got these, they're like, I think they came from like an OT shop. They're those squishy holder things that can help some kids hold their pencils. So I just got those, and I let my clients pick a color. It makes it easier to see. And then there's limitations to the screen. So sometimes clients are on their phone and you really have a limited screen space. And in that case, I just ask clients to continue their eye off the screen. And if they find a spot off the screen, they can brain spot with me present with their eyes looking off the screen. That works too.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and I just had one more thought about neurodivergent considerations. So something that has consistently happened with my clients is in phase 2 of the training, we talked about playing with depth perception. So like you could hold up your finger and you can look at the point of your finger, or you can look as far back at the wall as you can behind your finger without moving your eyes. You're just playing with the depth. And when I've done that with different clients, they have gotten really excited and said, that's what I used to do in school when I was anxious with my pencil. And it's been this really validating moment of, even though I didn't know what my diagnosis was, I felt like I was weird. I, on my own, when I trusted my body or just followed my body, knew how to develop a coping skill that was really effective for me in school. That's happened multiple times and just been cool to witness. So if anybody is interested in getting brain spotting training, you would look for trainings at brainspotting.com. There are lots of different options. There are lots of different trainers. Like I said, they're contracted and come from different perspectives, so you can read their profiles and see who would be a good fit for you. Once you take phase 1 training, then you are open to take any of the other trainings available. So they have trainings up through phase 4, and then they also have specific trainings like brain spotting for postpartum issues, or brain spotting for veterans. I don't know, what are some of the other ones, Marie? I'm blanking.
I'm sorry, I was distracted by the chat.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, there are lots of options. So if you're interested, just look at trainings at brainspotting.com.
There's a question of any recommendations for brain spotting trainers that are neurodiversity affirming. And I will just say that my trainer for phase 1 was not neurodiversity affirming, but I requested to be paired with another neurodivergent person. And then we were paired to practice like the whole time together. And so that is where I felt like it got really affirming. Like I felt like we were able to, because there was like a coach that would sort of like pop in and you could ask them questions, able to just sort of like make modifications that felt good for us.
I had several different trainers, but in both of my trainings, I had Liana Swanson, and she was incredible and so thoughtful and affirming, and really validating of how different people's identities and life experiences would impact this.
I will say that I felt like mine was so regional to sort of like dominant culture in the United States that I signed up for my phase 2 out of Thailand. There's a multicultural international one, which I'm excited about. It's going to be from 4 p.m. to midnight next weekend. So I think that that'll be fun. But I'm really excited to the way that Ellie's told me about the trainings that they've had. It seems like it's a lot more intuitive related to sort of like community and moving out of sort of a capitalistic structure into community healing and healing ourselves and those that we love.
So if there aren't any more questions, we do have a really full consult scheduled for today. So we're going to stop recording and I'm going to turn it over to Marie. Thank you for letting me be with you. It was so good to talk about all of this.